Well, what a fascinating subject we're going to talk about today, Fiona. Fiona King, welcome to Tune In, which is the podcast and the storytelling channel on subject matter that's all around the holistic enterprise. So Fiona, we've known each other for a little while, professionally and as friends, and I've always found the subject that you represent right now, the future of money, seriously fascinating, to be perfectly honest. So I suppose the question I'm going to ask is, how did it all start? Because you're leading the dance in the city at the minute as regards sort of cryptocurrencies and tokens and things, but there's a history to this, isn't there, of how you have ended up doing what you're doing. So welcome, and let's hear what the future of money's about.
Yeah. Thank you very much, and thank you very much for inviting me along.
No
much appreciated. So really all started, I've been in traditional finance for about 20 odd years, very much focusing on alternatives and hedge funds. And then about 4.5 years ago, I was approached by a friend of mine who'd set up his own digital asset manager, and I'd seen his feeds coming through on LinkedIn. I thought, what's this all about? Didn't understand cryptocurrency, etc. And he said, just give us an hour in the boardroom, Fiona. We'd like you to come and work for the company.
Wow.
And I thought, okay, an hour of my time, I can give that, yes. Being a salesperson, always intrigued to find out what's happening. So sat down with him and his two fellow founders of the company. And after an hour, I thought, my goodness, this is the future of finance. Right. This is going to change the whole horizon of what finance is all about.
Wow.
So I was very excited and joined that company. I was there for 2.5 years, brilliant experience. Then I went to another company, a digital asset manager who was setting up by a large Japanese bank. Was there for just under 2 years. And then recently I've joined a company which is actually at the forefront of stablecoins and stablecoin yield management, which is very interesting. And for a lot of my clients who are in very much traditional finance, the crypto was very interesting. They were intrigued to find out about it.
Yes.
But for them, it's very racy and it's quite volatile. So they were looking for something a little bit more stable. So for me, this made logical sense.
Sure thing. And it's interesting, isn't it? Because my own experience with digital currencies is, do you feel there's a lack of awareness at the levels there needs to be for people to, start to consider this from a future of currency and money and trade? I mean, I know we're going to come on to some world challenges at the minute and how we see this really sort of, coming to life in real-time situations, which is interesting. But I think if you look at the banking industry, it's historically it's been a very stable industry and, quite cautious and risk-averse in many ways.
Yeah.
So you shifting from that environment to this environment, obviously there's a serious belief there that you can see this all really playing out over the next few years and things radically changing in the way that we actually even have a relationship with the word money. Or will the word money, stay with us? I don't know. But obviously the point I'm trying to get to is the awareness seems to be, there needs to be an integrity of this out there. I'm sure you agree with this, because there is all sorts of variations of a thing. The other point I want to try and sort of emphasize is crypto and stablecoins. What's the difference?
Yeah. Really good point, because crypto, the first white paper was written by Satoshi Nakamoto in 2008.
Wow.
And then the first Bitcoin was issued in 2009 at 1 cent.
Wow.
Now Bitcoin trading today at around about $71,000.
Wow.
It's an incredible journey and a very fast journey that it's been on. But what's incredible, I think, is that the cryptocurrencies have been around for that period of time, and what people have adopted and looking at the cryptocurrencies. And I think it's a very small percentage of the marketplace, and I do believe it's because of that awareness. And then the main difference between stablecoins and crypto, a stablecoin is a cryptocurrency, but it is pegged usually to a fiat currency or a commodity.
Okay.
So it has a more stable value to itself.
Right.
that marketplace is around about 233 billion as we speak at the moment.
Wow,
and
growing.
they expect it to grow by 2030 to $1 trillion, which is incredible growth. The three major stable coins are Tether, Circle and Dai, and they make up probably around about 85-90% of that marketplace. And what's really interesting is, some traders, and you touched on that briefly there, across the world where their own currency is so volatile are using stable coins to trade.
Are they?
Because, yeah, absolutely.
But this is not mainstream sort of public intelligence,
I think what's happening is the banks are really concerned because all of a sudden, if everybody starts trading and using stable coins, they're going to, because it's instantaneous payment. So you use blockchain as the technique to actually get to make the payments.
So that's the backbone of trade, isn't it? The blockchain.
Yes, it is, absolutely.
Yeah.
And if you don't, the blockchain technology is moving so quickly and evolving so quickly at such a fast pace that, it's instantaneous when you make a payment. It's marginally a cost of what you would at a bank.
Yeah.
And the banks can see their deposits flooding out of the banking system, and this is where they have to have those deposits because that's how they lend out, that's how they earn, and that's how they earn their monies.
Wow. And
this is their business model, and they can see this breaking down. And I think they're trying to keep it under wraps. They don't want everybody dealing in stable coins, and why should they not be? Because it's a decentralized finance.
It's quite seductive as well, isn't it? Because if you look at the public situation around people getting rich quick, I had my own personal debate with it last week, and I thought, is it money? Is it an investment? Interesting, because that word investment, historically in traditional banking terms, is always a long-term strategy of putting your money in here and watching it grow over like a lifetime. Particularly pension funds were engineered on it.
Yes.
So I suppose coming back to the sort of stable coins, the stable coins, obviously, I think the proof's in the word that they're stable. Stable.
Yeah.
And it feels like they're underwriting it. The pillars of trade are stable coins, and then obviously you've got the tokenization element of what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Pardon the language, were pegged against material, i.e., everything from art to
real world assets.
Right.
Absolutely, that tokenization is coming, and some of those larger institutions and asset managers are already starting to embrace that and tokenizing some of their funds, which is, that is happening at this moment in time, which is really interesting to see.
It is.
But the banks are still pushing back. I think it's we're talking like 5% of the banks, and it tends to be more the American banks that are embracing it. But certainly not. Yeah.
You know what this reminds me of is the gold rush. Really, I think that if we look at history coming into the times we're in right now, is we're dripping it in slowly because we can't afford a huge crash at one end and we've all shifted over here overnight. There's a lot of casualty there.
Yes.
And at the social level, people's livelihoods are affected on a grand scale. So we've obviously got to slowly merge, but it's getting faster, isn't it?
Absolutely.
And I think we're now coming to the end of almost like, well, we're nearly at the halfway point of 2025. And I think with the pace of change technically and AI coming into it this year, it's AI companies are spawning like jellyfish. Same goes with digital currencies, particularly tokens.
Yes.
And obviously the stable coin world. So we're slowly educating. But my question is around education. Do you feel that there's more needs to be done to sort of give people what I would call traditional banking belief? If this is the future of money, it's the future of banking. Yeah. So therefore, we need to educate the general public that this is a safe domain.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, it's maybe a little bit where Google was in the middle of the 1990s.
Yes.
And everybody was like a little bit skeptical about what, I'm not using my yellow pages anymore. I got on the computer, but I use a browser myself.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, everybody started to use iPhones, and quickened that process. But it was that public awareness and educating people on the fact that actually you don't have to go to a book and look it up. You can go onto the computer and it's feeding all this information through, but it makes life a lot easier.
Yeah.
That's exactly what digital and cryptocurrencies are going to be doing, whether they be stable coins predominantly, and obviously the other cryptocurrencies as well. And when you touch on investments, I mean, what was interesting is that the first UK pension fund allocated to cryptocurrency last year, which is really interesting to see. And that came from an investment consultant. Now, and I always say, you position a cryptocurrency like something like Bitcoin or one of those other cryptocurrencies in a proportion of what, because it is a volatile currency. But, you take that into account and you look at what it adds to your portfolio, the upside potential is phenomenal.
It's interesting because of recent, I did my own sort of guerrilla research onto Bitcoin. Had peaked at about 100 and something and then it dropped.
Yes.
And somebody said to me, oh, that's high risk. I said, well, you know what happened, don't you? And they said, what? I said, well, people got very wealthy very quickly and they decided to spend.
Yeah.
So they withdrew money because it's not seen as this long term thing, but it's a fuel for life, which brings me on to the holistic enterprise. We are seeing the change nature of work, is reducing. We're seeing AI now replacing, and we are requalifying for our lives in mid-flight with all of this. So my view is, I think digital currency, obviously as long as it's backed in the appropriate way, is the essence of how we're going to live, and that could be a good life. Because if you think about it, that it creates almost like an energy, a fuel into your lifestyle. You don't have to wait for 30 years for your portfolio to mature. It can do it cyclically, almost with the seasons. And my prediction with Symmetry is we will work 3 days a week 10 months of the year, and that obviously, even with that statement, it frightens people because don't you want more leisure? Don't you want to have a better quality of life at a higher standard? I think the digital currency world is going to leverage all of this. Because and I'm talking from the street. I mean, obviously institutional, which is you. You're underwriting the future of stable coins as an individual. And having come from that brand, I know the banks you've worked for, the high integrity banks, to be using that power of influence to pioneer this must be quite exciting.
It's really exciting, and it's probably where hedge funds were back in the sort of early 70s, not that I was around then, but it's so exciting and it is pioneering. But it is the future of finance, and blockchain technology is going to change. And I think the sooner the banks recognise that and embrace it, then the education of the general public will increase, and everybody's awareness of this asset class will increase, and it'll make our lives a lot easier.
Yeah, I think so. And if we look at there's a lot of the arguments going on is Donald Trump and his musketeers basically engineering a financial collapse, and with all these tariffs and all the rest of it. I mean, I'm not a subject matter expert to be able to comment on that wholly, but if I look at the logic in trade, if supply chain starts to wither on the vine as we have it in traditional terms, this is the time for blockchain to come in and re-regulate the whole, supply event on a global scale. And with instant transactions and smart contracts, and it takes a lot of red tape out. So I think we're slowing down to speed up to sort of find a new pace of life. And I think that technology is sculpting that future, and digital currency obviously is in that slipstream. So
absolutely,
you're pioneering for the greater good.
Absolutely. We're totally with that.
So obviously this is professional, but obviously today's discussion, and I think we talked about this, is I like to meet people that are standing for something with meaning and belief. So obviously your professional credentials and your personal view, you see this as the future wholeheartedly, yeah?
Absolutely, 100%. Yeah, there's no doubt about that. Yeah,
Right.
I mean, it's been around since 2008, which is a relatively short time, but it's an asset class. You look at the cryptocurrency market cap now, it's $3 trillion.
Yeah.
That's phenomenal, and it's the amount of that network effect as well. So, I think this is only going to increase in size. So, and I think the sooner the banks and the institutions embrace this as a regular asset class that they will allocate to and seriously consider.
So if we look at traditional banking economics, that seems to be on the edge as well now, doesn't it?
Absolutely,
the whole sort of like educational system must be really changing its view. At the heart level about the pulse of economics is really changing in the calculations, and so it's a significant shift into its evolution. Really, it's
and I think the
industrial revolution.
It is, and if the banks don't adapt, unfortunately, they're going to fall by the wayside. Because their business model is threatened with this.
Yeah. It's interesting, and just diversing for a second, I was talking about AI, and, this week I dabbled with it from a research perspective, and I was just hooked and fascinated. I was researching Celtic history, and it was really, really fascinating, the speed of it.
I know, it's incredible.
And this is obviously going to be emanated as well with digital, the pace of how we exchange, our tokens. So I do have a $64 million question with digital currency and proof of value and the likes. Do you ever see people being tokenized or digitized intellectually?
I suppose it could happen, absolutely. I mean, real world assets being tokenization of that is a possibility.
So the human brain could be tokenized.
In a way, but you could probably...
That's an Elon Musk answer.
And
actually an Elon Musk question. Nicely in the middle. No, I think everything's possible. I think that's what we're trying to say. But if we look at the macro supply chain that's out there now, world trade, it's up for sale, isn't it? It's shifting. And
very much so.
The engine of this. So I think, if you did put sense in there, and I think that, like all institutions, particularly banking institutions, they like to see good old-fashioned sense. This does make sense, but it's not old-fashioned sense, is it?
Because it's not tangible. They can't get, and they wrestle with it.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, this is the future of finance.
Really? Wow. Well, it's good, and I think that we talked a little bit earlier about the pace of change and pace of time that's changing with it.
Yeah.
And I remember literally saying 5 years ago that 1 week feels like a month,
Absolutely.
a month is a quarter, and a quarter is a year. I'm now feeling and sensing that the pace of change is that ferociously quick.
Yeah.
A week is a year of change.
Yeah.
So I'm predicting,
and that's the influence of AI and blockchain technology moves so quickly that's compounding that. Yeah.
Well, with AI, it's just arrived.
Yeah.
It's like, it's everywhere all of a sudden.
Yeah.
So I think these shifts are coming. I think it's going to be very interesting. A rally up to around June this year, and then June onwards, I think we're going to see a real gear change in where, the digital currency world starts to come really into mainstream fashion, literally. And obviously AI is going to be the enabler.
Yeah.
And then we've got the world trade dynamic of new supply chain coming, which is about speed and making things quicker. So it brings me on to sort of, as we start to wrap up our very high-paced conversation, is that we are now in a situation where strategy, that word, is kind of disappearing. It's now we're working a lot more with instinct, and which goes back to our ancestors as well about how we made decisions in the past. So one of the big inhibitors in any sort of pioneering is decision dysfunction and market uptake. My prediction now, given what I've just learned, is there's a lot going on in the background, Fiona, that is not in public, domain. Yeah. So as an educator in this market, you must find it quite exciting.
Oh, it's phenomenal. I mean, I think it's all about educating,
right.
Whether I'm talking to a traditional financial institution, a family office, etc. But I think from a world perspective, You know, there's particular currencies and traders that have adopted, you know, trading in stable coins because their own currency has been so volatile, and they've got it. You know, you look at like places like Nigeria and Brazil, they're trading in stable coins already.
Wow.
You know, so that adoption is happening, but it's in pockets at the moment. And I think what will happen in 2025, they said 2020 was the year of the institution. It definitely wasn't. I think it's going to be 2025 going into 2026. And I think we're going to see a huge shift there as some large institutions adopting, maybe firstly in the first instance stable coins, but cryptocurrency as well.
I think it's fantastic that you are now involved in an environment that has true vision.
Yeah.
And, you know, I was talking just literally about vision versus strategy. The two are intertwined clearly. But I think vision and instinct is the sort of the map and the compass for, you know, pioneering new ground, and particularly when the pace of change is so ferociously quick.
Okay.
But today, I've got to say, like always, Fiona, I always learn so much from you on this subject, and I know this is the tip of the iceberg, but it's been a pleasure to talk to you and learn, obviously, on this journey. I know that the next number of months are going to be fascinating for you. But yeah, once again, you know, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Fiona King, the font of knowledge when it comes to stable coins.
Thank you.
Thank you.